Good morning, everyone. I'm Rachel Feinstein, Director of DC Government and Community Relations with the JCRC of Greater Washington. I'm thrilled that so many of you have signed up to join this webinar to hear from Kenyan McDuffie, former DC council member, prosecutor. He served in the Civil Rights Division of President Obama's Department of Justice, and now candidate for mayor of DC. Thank you, Mr. McDuffie, for making time in your schedule to speak with us today. Before we begin, I'll provide a few disclaimers and some logistics for today's webinar. The JCRC is a 501c3 tax-exempt organization, which means we do not endorse candidates. We utilize objective criteria in every election to determine who can participate in our candidate forums to maintain our nonprofit status. The mayoral candidates we are speaking with this week will be on the ballot, and they have raised at least 15% of the amount raised in the current election cycle by the campaign of the candidate in the same race, which has raised the most funds. The conversation today will be moderated by Alan Korn, JCRC board member and co-chair of JCRC's DC committee and a longtime DC and Ward 4 resident. The format is as follows. Alan will ask 9 questions of the candidate, Kenyan McDuffie, who will have 3 minutes to respond to each question. A timer will be displayed on the screen. We will then turn to audience submitted questions. Some submitted questions before the webinar, but feel free to submit additional questions using the Q&A box. We will do our best to get to as many questions as possible during the time allotted. Then Mr. McDuffie will have 2 minutes to provide closing remarks. And with that, Alan, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Rachel. Good morning, Kenyan. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you, Alan?
Good. First, by way of a personal privilege and maybe a personal comment, I wanted to make a point to make this a comment. We, the JCRC, and I very much appreciate and recognize the fact that you're joining us today. We are less than a month away from the primary, even less for early voting, and time is a very valuable commodity for a candidate. And you, nonetheless, have agreed to spend 35 minutes with us. And I just wanted you to know right at the top that we appreciate and recognize you giving us some of that valuable time.
Right. No, absolutely. I appreciate being with you as always, Alan.
Yeah, I'll get started real quick. There's, as Rachel said, there's not 9 questions. The first one is kind of an open-ended question, and the last one I'll put you on notice is kind of a fun question. It won't take long to answer at all, but we'll get to it when that comes in the program. The first question is, for those that have the courage and the willingness to throw their hat in the ring, especially for an executive position, whether that's President of the United States, governor of a state, or mayor of a big or even a small city. Traditionally and historically, the first question that's always asked to them is, why do you want to be mayor? And that's the question. Maybe fill us in and explain to us why you want to be mayor, and maybe within that question, what distinguishes you from the other candidates?
Sure. And thank you for the question. Thank you to Rachel as well, and to JCRC for hosting this conversation today. Alan, I really do appreciate the opportunity to be with you all. But I also want to recognize Ron Howard for his leadership and commitment to fighting anti-Semitism and strengthening interfaith partnerships across the district and the region. And wanted to just lift that up as well before I jump into answering, I think, the question that everybody always asks mayoral candidates when they run. I also want to, recognize, though, that today is the anniversary of the murders of Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram outside the Capitol Jewish Museum. And so that shook our entire city. And to have this conversation with you all at a time where I think people in the Jewish community really are feeling anxious about public safety, about rising hate, and all the other issues that we have in the District of Columbia, I really am fighting for our entire city. I'm running for mayor because I want to be mayor for all DC. I want to deliver for all DC, a city that is safer in terms of every neighborhood, regardless of where you live in your zip code. I want to make our city more affordable in terms of housing across incomes, deeply affordable housing and missing middle housing. And I want to usher in economic opportunity into communities that have felt left behind. communities where people are living in the margins and where, in the case of our immigrant neighbors, they're literally living in the shadows of our city. I want to make sure that we deliver stronger schools across the District of Columbia and a government that is accountable to the people of the District of Columbia. Effective, efficient government with an emphasis on reestablishing a culture of transparency, accountability, and a culture of execution. So that we don't have to default to raising people's taxes, but we still deliver those core services in a way that makes everybody proud and takes care of the residents across the District of Columbia.
Thank you, sir. We'll get right to some of the more specific topics, and
Yeah,
I'll get right on to question number 2.
yeah, you bet.
How would your administration navigate the district's limited home rule authority to protect local autonomy and advance your policy priorities when they conflict with federal directives? Specifically, what guiding principles would shape your engagement with Congress and, of course, the Trump administration? And where would you draw the line between strategic compromise and firm resistance to federal interference?
Yeah. So I'm going to make sure that we are approaching this putting DC first. What do I mean by that? I mean DC's 700,000 residents and the businesses that create jobs across our city. At a time when we're experiencing extreme economic headwinds, largely driven by the federal government and federal policy, we need a mayor who understands both how to balance our budget, how to protect our bond rating, but also how to deliver a city that protects residents. And my guiding principle is going to be work with the federal government where possible, fight back where necessary. I'll repeat that. Work with the federal government where possible, fight back where necessary. It means that I'm not going to poke the bear, but I will work with the federal government where there's an opportunity to use federal funds to create a safer city for the District of Columbia, to use federal funds when it comes to enhancing infrastructure around our city, to work with the federal government when it comes to projects like RFK, or something that I'm specifically going to prioritize as mayor, which is the expansion of Union Station. Again, like RFK, a generational economic development and infrastructure project that's going to help create thousands of jobs at a time where the District of Columbia needs more jobs. And we can't rely as much on the federal government or the District of Columbia government in terms of creating jobs. We need to restore confidence in the private sector and drive private investment into the District of Columbia's local economy. So I'm going to work with the federal government where possible on those types of projects, dispose of federal, underutilized federal properties to develop and get them on the tax rolls for Washington, D.C. On the other hand, there is a line. I've spent my entire career in public office, and before that in public service at the Department of Justice and as a prosecutor, fighting crime and delivering justice for victims, traveling the country and investigating jails, prisons, mental health facilities, police departments, making sure the conditions are constitutional. In other words, I've spent my entire career focused on fairness and justice and bending the moral arc of the universe closer to justice. And so I'm drawing a line when it comes to protecting our residents, including our immigrant neighbors. And I would rescind the executive order that allows cooperation between the Metropolitan Police Department and ICE, because I understand as a police practices expert and somebody who's done this work on the council in terms of authoring our police one body camera legislation and making policing more transparent, but also supporting our police department. I understand, Alan, that we need the police to make sure that we have accountability and consequences and hold people accountable when they commit crimes, but we also need opportunity. And so I'm going to draw a bright line with that cooperation, because having ICE and HSI and the National Guard embedded in MPD actually makes us less safe. It erodes the trust. And what I know is that in order to have public safety, you must first have public trust. And we have to rebuild that public trust that's been shaken in the Metropolitan Police Department, both because of the embedding of ICE and HSI and National Guard with MPD, but also because of the scandal regarding crime stats. So we have to restore a culture of accountability and transparency at the Metropolitan Police Department and get rid of ICE and that cooperation.
Yeah, thank you, Kenyon. And much of your answer talked upon public safety, and rightfully so. A portion of it talked about economics and rebuilding the city, and that leads me into our third question for you. Over the past year and a half, the district has seen the loss of thousands of jobs, including federal jobs. And Kenyon, I know plenty of people who have lost federal jobs,
Yes,
people I work with in my professional career. They're struggling. The city needs an economic boost. We've seen many cities across the country go through an economic downturn. Due to the breakdown of the city's primary industry, we around the JCRC, we talk of Pittsburgh and how they've rebuilt
uh,
with a comeback and a focus on medical and tech sectors, working with universities and business leaders. As mayor, how would you, and what are some of the specific ways you would build back the DC communities? You touched on some of them in the prior answer. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, no, and it's a great question. You point out Pittsburgh. I've seen what Pittsburgh's been doing. I've also looked at what Boston's been doing. Austin, Texas has done some really important things. We are facing, as I mentioned earlier, really serious economic headwinds, largely due to federal policy and interference in DC's local economy by the president and by people on Capitol Hill. On the other hand, we still have the benefit of not having to compete with any other city in America to be the nation's capital. So our fundamentals, I believe, are solid. Um, we have to grow our economy, though, Alan. We have to focus on being a city that means business. In other words, we cannot rely on the expansion of the federal government in order to have growth. We cannot rely on the expansion of DC government, which already has an outsized amount of DC government jobs relative to the amount of residents in our city when you compare to other cities. And so we have to focus on attracting private investment. Being the nation's capital, we have proximity to the seat of power and policymaking in a way that gives us an advantage. And so we also have three airports that feed into our city, and we have world-class institutions when it comes to hospitals and healthcare, when it comes to universities and education. And so we have to lean all the way in to innovation and technology in a way that we haven't. Tell that aspect of our story so that people understand that we're not just a sleepy federal government town. We're actually a place that is capable of really growing innovation in tech in the District of Columbia and looking at what other jurisdictions have done. I've done things like put a couple million in the budget 2 years ago after talking to the CEO of Capital Factory, which is a company based in Austin, Texas. It's doing amazing things, attracting founders and capital and investors in Austin, Texas. I love what they were doing. I asked them to, come here, and I put $2 million in the budget as an incentive for them to build out their headquarters. It's called Station DC. It's on the campus of Union Market today. They're building out their membership. It is growing like wildfire, and they're attracting founders and investors to Washington, D.C. People who are starting their companies are locating here because we made that small investment. And we need to do more of that, partnering with our world-class universities like Georgetown, Howard University, GW, like our world-class hospitals at MedStar, Georgetown, Washington Hospital Center, as well as the Children's National. Tell the story about the Sheikh Zayed Center and all the innovation that's happening there. So lean into that, grow the jobs, show up at these schools, our DC public schools, our DC public charter schools, and not just in high school, but in middle school, and really show those young folks what a career pathway looks like into those industries. We're also, Alan, going to double down on the industries that feed tourism in the District of Columbia. So hospitality, tourism, restaurants, arts and entertainment, our creative economy. We have potential for growth there. And another area where I think there's really some potential for growth is our sports industry. We're about to invest over $1 billion of taxpayer money working with the Commanders, and they're going to invest $2.8 billion to make the largest private investment in our city's history to build a stadium to attract the Commanders back. It's not just about a stadium and 8 home games a year. It's not just about funding games in football. It is really an investment that is going to amount closer to $8 billion when it's all in for the commercial development as well. That's going to create thousands of jobs. thousands of units of sorely needed housing and neighborhood serving amenities. It's going to have hotels, it's going to have restaurants, it's going to have retail. We're going to have a grocery store that I helped to negotiate so that we can have access to healthy foods in Ward 7. All those things are possible with a level of intentionality and an eye towards growth. Be a pro growth, pro predictability city so that we're leaning into having an abundance mentality so that we're focused on those industries where we see growth, creating jobs, connecting connecting DC residents to those jobs, both displaced federal workers and young folks who are starving for opportunity to those jobs, but also making government more predictable, Alan, making the agencies work better and faster, work at the speed of people's daily lives and the speed at which business actually happens in the District of Columbia so we can be more competitive and attract the people and the businesses that we need to grow our tax base.
I've lived in the district since 1992, and I'll just make a personal comment and get right to the next question. I love living in the District of Columbia. It's been 40 plus years, and I'm just now being able to say I can make a dent in all the things to see and do in the District of Columbia. And so I agree with you on that tourism comment for sure. No surprise that the JCRC is going to touch upon one of the issues that you touched upon in your opening comment, our first question, and that's the rise of anti-Semitism and hate around the country and even in the district. And thank you for recognizing the anniversary of a tragic event. The question: the Jewish community has faced an unprecedented rise in the acts of hate in recent years. The ADL recently released a report on anti-Semitism that showed that although incidents of vandalism and harassment are down from 2024, 2025 was one of the most violent periods in American Jews since 1979. There's an increasing need, we believe, in DC, our nation's capital, for increased security at vulnerable institutions. How would your administration ensure adequate security to protect faith-based and community organizations of all kinds at risk of hate crime, especially given the rising threats, strong local demand that already exceeds available funds, and the uncertainty around the federal support like the Nonprofit Security Grant Program?
Absolutely, and thank you for the question, Alan. I think it's just important from the outset of answering this question to be crystal clear with everybody that regardless of whether anti-Semitism is up or down in the district, we can recognize globally what we're seeing across the world right now and how serious these challenges are. And I'm going to address anti-Semitism as mayor, as I did as a council member, with a sense of urgency, with a sense of seriousness and moral clarity that it requires. As I mentioned earlier, I've dedicated my career to ensuring fairness and justice across the country and in Washington, D.C. And as a former prosecutor and civil rights attorney, I've really valued the opportunity to make our city more fair and more just. I understand both the legal and human dimensions of hate crimes. Anti-Semitism is, for some in the Jewish community, for everybody in the Jewish community, pardon me, and others who care deeply about this city, it is not theoretical. It has, I think, and what we know, deadly consequences. And I really just wanted to stress that. So as mayor, I'm going to strengthen coordination, Alan, between the Metropolitan Police Department and the community security leaders that you all unfortunately have to have. I'm going to improve hate crime reporting and tracking through the Metropolitan Police Department, working with federal law enforcement as well. We're going to help nonprofits across our city access to the extent it is available. If it's not, work with our federal partners on the Hill, both our delegate to Congress and others who care deeply about these issues. We're going to help access federal nonprofit security grant program funding to help harden facilities against attacks. I'm also going to maintain really open and direct communication with the Jewish community, including Jewish organizations across our city, so that any security concerns that you all have can be elevated immediately and have a swift response from city leadership. I think that's extraordinarily important to make sure that there's swift and certain responses and consequences when things do happen. And finally, I'll just sort of end where I started. Anti-Semitism is unacceptable, and just as frankly all forms of hate are unacceptable. And DC is the nation's capital, and it must be a city where everyone feels safe and everyone is respected. And as mayor, it is my job as a top elected official to deliver that message across the city and across the country so that everybody understands people who live here and people who visit here are going to be safe. And I'm gonna make sure that we ensure that.
We don't have to spend a full 3 minutes on this next question, but I want
Okay.
to just drill down just in one comment that you made, because it was a setup for my next question, which was basically there's 75,000 Jews in the District of Columbia. I mean, I was even surprised by that number. How would you, and you did make reference to it, but maybe just a few more seconds on it. How would you structure your team, the architecture of your administration, to strengthen relationships with that large Jewish community?
Yeah, no, I believe in, being a coalition building. I'm going to govern as mayor in the way that I engage as a council member, which is building broad coalitions, meeting people where they are, to have conversations, including difficult conversations where perhaps people don't agree. I believe in one DC. And I think it's the mayor's responsibility to bring people together, not divide communities or decide which residents are worthy of engagement, frankly. And so I'm going to make sure that the leadership that I hire conveys that and really executes my vision of one DC, of economic growth with guardrails so that we're growing our economy in a way that it doesn't displace people or divide people. And so that's the approach generally that I take to government, that I take to leadership. And I'm going to make sure that we hire people who execute on that vision and engage with purpose in the way that I've laid out, Alan, so that people understand there's always going to be an open line of communication with my administration. And I'm going to be the person who shows up and meets people in communities where they are and meeting them to have conversations and make sure that everybody across the District of Columbia feels safe, regardless of where you live.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, you want to please.
Yeah. Another issue that's important to us, and as you most certainly know, the Early Childhood Education Pay Equity Fund, which provides $60 million to ensure livable wages to child care and preschool educators. It was fully funded in 2022 and in following years, but was eliminated in the mayor's proposed 27 budget. The cut specifically would severely impact DC's childcare sector, including 4 Jewish preschools that rely on it. What is your position on this program and its funding?
My position is what it's always been. I've been one of the biggest champions working with Vince Gray when he had that vision for Birth to Three, and understanding that DC already has an advantage over a lot of cities because we offer universal pre-K, but making sure that we make the connection and help make this city more affordable by fulfilling Vince Gray's vision of Birth to Three was important for me. So I was happy to support pay equity as well as the child care subsidy and PKeep to make DC more affordable for families that want to stay here. And so my position remains the same. I believe a budget is a moral document, and that for me, I am prioritizing pay equity. I am prioritizing the child care subsidy, and I'm prioritizing PKeep. Does it mean we'll have to make tough decisions? Sure. But it's a $21 billion budget. Means there's going to be room to be able to decide what's a priority. And for me, I'm going to make sure that those 3 things I mentioned, pay equity, child care subsidy, and PKeep, are prioritized in the budgets that I send to the council. I'm going to fight to protect it when I send it to the council. So that's always been my position. My preference is to be able to afford to pay for those programs, prioritize them in the budget without raising taxes, which is a key distinction between me and others who are running for this office.
Thank you, sir. We've got one more question, or dare I say one and a half more questions, because the last one will be a simple one to respond to. But we wanted to make sure we emphasize something important to our community. A Jewish tradition recognizes the importance of a home as a sacred place. Affordable, accessible, and safe housing is therefore a very important social justice issue for our DC Jewish community. The budget for the Affordable Housing Production Trust Fund is once again in jeopardy in the budget cycle. Any reduction to this program will reduce the city's ability to support and build housing options, including a vital link for our synagogues and interfaith partners. The Affordable Housing Production Trust Fund faces a proposed cut. I'm sure you know, I've heard you speak on it,
Yes.
from $100 million to $50 million. Where do you stand on this reduction, and how would your administration ensure access to affordable housing? And I mentioned some of our synagogues and temples in the area. They spend a lot of their time in their social justice efforts helping people who need affordable housing and are having trouble making ends meet.
Absolutely. And every person who lives in the District of Columbia deserves access to quality, safe, affordable housing. I believe that deeply. I'm speaking to you. I went from one event this morning and I made a pit stop on my way to the next event to take this Zoom. I'm sitting in the home that my grandparents bought back in 1952, Alan. It's a home that has a racially restrictive covenant on it. My grandparents bought this home only 4 years after the seminal Supreme Court case that said the federal government could no longer enforce racially restrictive covenants. That case happened in 1948, Shelley v. Kramer, and my grandparents, as courageous as they were, purchased this home 4 years later. And so I'm the third generation to live here. My wife and I understand fundamentally how important it is for us to be able to have this home. And we also understand if we were to buy this home on the market today, we likely could not afford it. And so I'm going to fight to make sure there's more funding in the Housing Production Trust Fund. And I'm not just making that promise as a candidate for mayor, as a council member. I authored the legislation that requires anytime that the District of Columbia government has a surplus, 50% by law is directed to the Housing Production Trust Fund. I also authored a law that says whenever the District of Columbia disposes of its own land for the purpose of building multifamily housing of 10 units or more, there has to be a set aside for affordable housing. 20% floor, it goes up to 30% when it's near transit hubs, right? And so I have a track record of actually delivering legislation to enhance housing affordability in the District of Columbia. And so when I make the commitment as a candidate to tell you that I'm going to build in my housing plan 12,000 units of new housing, preserve 20,000 units of existing housing, and build 1,500 units of family size housing, then you can trust that I'm going to deliver on that promise. I was the person who funded the family size unit housing study a few years ago that the Coalition for Nonprofit Housing and Economic Development conducted, which came back and told us what we already know. We need more family housing in the District of Columbia. And so I've laid out a plan that is perhaps more pragmatic, nevertheless bold in an environment where investors don't have confidence in our market. And I'm going to be able to deliver on my commitments, unlike my principal opponent, whose plan the Washington Post called unrealistic and a fantasy. And so I've laid out how I plan to approach this. But I also know that I'm going to create a fast lane to unlock those stuck deals and get them across the finish line so that the permits and process for development doesn't take 9 months or a year, right? You should be able to get those permits a lot quicker. And I'm going to cut the permitting process by half to make sure that we can build the housing that we need across the city and across incomes so that we can protect what I think is our greatest asset. Our greatest asset are not those buildings downtown. It's not, public officials who count cranes with pride. Our greatest asset is our people. It's our beautiful diversity. And I'm going to make sure that we can invest in our people, build the housing that we need, create the jobs that we need, grow our economy and our tax base so that we can attract new people and new business starts. We're going to make it easier to start a business as well. When I get into office, one of the first things I do, Alan, is going to be a comprehensive audit of the District of Columbia government, looking at all performances across all major agencies, looking at procurement processes, looking at permitting processes, and making all those things more efficient so the District of Columbia government operates better and faster.
Thank you, Kenyon. I'm going to put Rachel on deck. She'll, if we have time here, do some questions from the audience and also be respectful to our 40 to 45-minute commitment, because we know you have to wear out some more shoes out on the street of
Absolutely.
the district. But we did want to end, at least with the formal questions, with kind of a fun question, which we've asked all of our candidates in the forum. If I'm going to run into you in the district, what's your favorite restaurant in Washington, D.C.? And then if I can, I'm going to tell you mine.
Yeah, my favorite restaurant in Washington, D.C. Is, when it's this time of the year, it's The Point. It's called The Point. It's at Buzzard Point. It sits on the water. It's not far from Audi Field. And if you've been there, you know that you can catch a great sunset on the water and enjoy a good meal, including some seafood. And I really enjoy, my family and I, going to The Point. I haven't been in quite some time, and I look forward to winning this election and maybe seeing you down there soon.
Well, I'll just to close out, and then I'll give you over to Rachel, and maybe she might chime in on this too. Mine, I like a lot of the restaurants in district. I like the Hitching Point, the Hitching Post. Yeah, the Hitching Post. And in fact, just today is my birthday. I turned 62 today. And
Happy
when
birthday.
Thank you. And when the family says, where do I want to go for dinner tonight? We're going to get some fried chicken at the Hitching Post.
Alan, one of the places I have been about a month ago was the Hitching Post. I had the wings and fries.
Yes.
So
we'll run into each other there. Rachel, I know we've got a couple of questions from people from the audience, and if you'll chime in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So we've got a couple questions from the audience. We'll start off with an energy question. Many of us in the district have seen increases to electricity bills. One audience member has said that their electric bills have increased by over $100 each month compared to last year. What would you do as mayor to keep electric utility costs down?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. I think it's important for people to understand why we've seen the increases in our electric bills, as I have in my own home, and it's because of demand. It's because of demand on the grid at PJM, which is a regional wholesaler for electricity that the District of Columbia and Pepco in particular purchases it from. We've seen the increase there because of demand largely from data centers and data centers that aren't really in the District of Columbia. We probably have, I think, 6 data centers in the District of Columbia. Maryland has 10 times that amount. Virginia has nearly 100 times that amount. And that's the challenge that we're seeing right now. The way that we address it is to do a few things. We have to make sure we appoint public service commissioners who prioritize affordability. And as mayor, I'm going to appoint public service commissioners that prioritize establishing an affordability docket so that we keep our eyes laser focused on the ability to maintain affordable utilities. We're also going to create the ability to not have low income residents and seniors have to opt in. We're going to have automatic enrollment in the programs that help defray the cost of paying utility bills is going to be important as well. And we're also going to hold data centers accountable. If you look at what some jurisdictions are doing, including Maryland, which they just did during their legislative session, which is it's going to point things back where they belong, which is to hold data centers accountable for paying their fair share of increasing the overall cost to consumers when it comes to electricity and the use of power. We're also going to provide alternatives, increase the alternatives like solar. My principal opponent is, unfortunately voted against expanded solar bill that was on the council's agenda a few years ago. Me, on the other hand, I authored our renewable portfolio standards bill in the District of Columbia, and I worked with former council member for Ward 3, Mary Che, to draft the Clean Energy Act, which at the time we did it, I think it was 2018, was the most ambitious clean energy bill of any city in the country. So I'm proud of my record. I know we have a lot of work to do, but I think there's a way for us to be able to cut things back and protect consumers when it comes to utility affordability.
Great, thank you. And then another question we received: a sometimes overlooked way to make our streets safer is by investing in public transit. Neighborhoods get connected, the region's economy is strengthened, and fewer cars are on the road, improving traffic for everyone. How will you think about transit as part of your safety plan?
My safety plan, when I talk about safety, it includes transit. And as I've said previously, we need to achieve Vision Zero, but we're not going to achieve Vision Zero simply through ticket enforcement. We're not going to take it our way to Vision Zero. What we need to do is invest in it to make sure that our streets are connected and protected so that regardless of how you get around Washington, D.C., you are safe in our city. We need to look at transit and street design, frankly, in communities that largely have most of our highways and byways and communities east of the river, because the design is such that it really makes streets unsafe. And some of the most horrible crashes that we've seen more recently have occurred in parts of Wards 5, 7, and 8. And so we have to make sure that we invest in it in the way that we have it to achieve Vision Zero. I want to establish an actual office of Vision Zero. I know there's an initiative. I know there are people working on it, but I want to prioritize it to really elevate it so that we can finally achieve Vision Zero in a way that makes sense. We're going to make sure that we stay connected and protected, but also look at our automated traffic camera enforcement to ensure that we are prioritizing safety. Every single camera that we have must prioritize safety. If it doesn't, in the first 100 days, I'm going to work to remove it. And if it does, we're going to make sure that it stays. And if there are communities that don't have them, that need them, we're going to make sure we put them up. But we're also going to make sure that we have an equitable approach so that these cameras aren't predatory and simply there to drive revenue. We're going to make sure that we work with communities across the District of Columbia, including those communities who don't feel like they've been a part of the conversation when it comes to bike lane infrastructure. I think that's incredibly important. I know the value of bike lanes, but some communities feel put upon. And as we think about how government does its work through an equity lens, we have to show up in those communities and have conversations in a meaningful way so that they understand that everything we do when it comes to making our city more connected and protected is for them too, and ensuring that they have the resources to participate in a much more meaningful way as well. They should be able to afford to have bikes and be able to use those lanes like everybody else across the District of Columbia.
Great. In the last 40 seconds for this question or so, do you support creating a bike lane on Connecticut Ave? Was another question we received.
I wouldn't commit to that until I had a meaningful conversation with the people who live there and are impacted there and the small businesses along the corridor. I know this came up when I was running a few years ago. I mean, I would need to talk to Matt Fruman. I would need to talk to ANC commissioners. I would need to talk to small business owners and residents before making such a commitment.
Got it. Absolutely. Well, with that, we'll turn it to you for 2 minutes of closing remarks. Anything you'd like to say?
No, I really appreciate it. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation. I've appreciated the opportunity to be with you all today. Ultimately, this city needs to be more affordable. It needs to be more opportunity rich, and it needs to be safer. We need to have a government that is accountable to the people, using the people's priorities, using the people's resources for the people's priorities. And that's why I'm running for mayor. I have spent my entire career in public service and 13 and a half years as a council member fighting to make this city more racially equitable, more socially just, and more economically inclusive. And this campaign is not simply about rhetoric and big ideas. It's about big ideas with the experience to execute when elected. And I'm bringing both the ideas, the pragmatic leadership, and the ability to manage a $21 billion budget while we're facing economic declines so that we can turn things around. I lived through the tough times in the 1980s and 1990s, so much so that when I graduated from high school at Woodrow Wilson, now Jackson Reed, I didn't go to college right away, didn't even apply to a single college. I actually worked. I carried mail with the United States Postal Service, was able to save up, go to the University of District of Columbia, transfer to Howard University, and become the first man in my family to earn a college degree. I know what hard work looks like, and I do this work because it is my passion and my purpose, and it's also personal for me. I'm going to make sure that we lead this city in a way that makes it safer, that makes it more opportunity rich, and that delivers a government that's accountable to all of us. Thank you for the opportunity, JCRC. I really appreciate having this dialogue.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kenyan, for joining us today, and Alan for moderating this discussion, and thank you to our audience. If you want to learn more about these candidates and others running for office in the upcoming primary, the JCRC and Washington Jewish Week have published a comprehensive Jewish voters guide, which is posted on our website and which I will put into the chat right here. A recording of this and all our candidate forums will be posted and shared widely after our last candidate forum later today. Finally, remember to get out and vote, make your voice heard. Mail-in ballots were sent out last week and must be postmarked or dropped off in a ballot drop box by June 16th. Early voting begins June 8th. And of course, you can vote on Election Day, June 16th. Polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.